Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. This is Carl Dreschel. I will be your host. Please note that I cannot hear you as you're muted. If you have any questions, I would ask that you use the chat window during the presentation. The presentation will last about 30 minutes, and once complete, we will address any questions sent in and have an open Q&A session afterwards. Okay, let's get started. The theme of the webinar is using GSX Monitor and Analyzer to understand and monitor your Exchange environment. With that, let me introduce my colleague, Steve Bystrand, Senior Vice President, Global Sales and Business Development. Steve?
Hi, everybody, and welcome to our worldwide audience. As Carl mentioned, we've got about a 30-minute session here, so at the outset, I want to make sure everyone realizes there's no way we're going to be able to cover everything there is to say about this suite of solutions, GSX Monitor and GSX Analyzer, to monitor your Exchange messaging environment. Probably would take a little bit longer than that, so I'd invite you, if what you see here today is interesting, that you reach out either myself or to one of our sales team to schedule a one-on-one session, or alternatively, you could go to our website and download our tool and give it a try. So with that, let's talk a little bit about who we are. I'm going to try to kind of go fast just to give you some background information. First of all, GSX Monitor and Analyzer are actually two separate installations, but they're licensed together, and they work together to provide several different things to you. The first thing that we should talk about is that this solution is agentless. So there's no code required to be installed on your servers to accomplish monitoring. It provides for a very streamlined, virtually plug-and-play deployment of the product, so you can be working pretty quickly. And also, the resources consumed on the target servers is negligible. It's also kind of like one more user in your environment, and typically our clients install this on a VM slice somewhere, and it sits there and watches the whole shop cyclically over and over and over again. That is, we'll get into in somewhat more detail, but one very important point I want to mention is that we get things from the user perspective. So not only are we checking that particular servers will respond and specific Windows services are working, et cetera, which we'll get into in the session, but we also execute user transactions and user activities over and over again. That's the bullet point 2, the repetitive user scenarios, which becomes ultimate proof that the resources are up and functioning first, but secondly, it also gives you some benchmarks to understand what is the experience that a typical user might be receiving, and of course then is that acceptable. To kind of go a little bit further with that concept, let's talk about the objectives of monitoring. And this first one is what most people think of when they think of monitoring. Shorten, there's no such thing as an FRF cycle out there in the acronym world. I made this up myself. So the F is for failure. Something fails, something crashes, something's down, and the interval is when it's down and nobody recognized it. Well, we want to recognize it more quickly, and then so that we can then institute a fix so that the resource is up and functioning and the users can do their job. So most people think of, when they think of monitoring, they think of shortening this cycle. So, it's kind of like the fire alarm so that the firemen can show up. But GSX Monitor and Analyzer go a lot further than that. We want to help you be in your environment to be very proactive. So this concept of anticipating future failures based on changes in the way the environment is working. So before the users are impacted, before there is an unacceptable crash of some kind that impacts your business, we want to be able to help you see a change in the environment and allow you to do something to head off before it occurs. How do we do that? Yeah, it's all really data-driven, and we'll talk about that when we get into the screenshots here in a couple moments, understanding how your environment is behaving over time so that when there's a change, you can recognize that change. The third objective is in many ways the same time too, but looking at a different time scale. So things we're saying, we're providing reports, trends, dynamic executive dashboard, and we certainly do that. And all about understanding the data again, so that you can look at how things are changing over a larger time scale so you can architect your way out of problems before they get here. So these two concepts of being proactive and providing reports, et cetera, are looking at managing your environment more completely on two different time scales. Look who GSX is. We've been around since 1996. We have offices in several different countries, U.S. We're actually headquartered in Switzerland. We have offices in the UK and France as well. We specialize in monitoring and reporting on the collaborative environment. So that means multiple platforms. Here we're here primarily to talk about Exchange, but we also monitor SharePoint. We also monitor mobility. We also monitor Domino, as a matter of fact. So some of our clients have multiple platforms that you can monitor those. Our clients are a pretty broad range of peer companies to you. There's about 600 of them worldwide, and actually some of those are managed service providers, so there's actually way more than that. But to us, the MSP is one client, even if they have 50 or 60 clients behind them. And again, they're in mixed platforms. Very quickly, just some logos of some folks you might know, and then let's go over what our agenda is today. So we're going to talk about multi-platform. We're going to talk about understanding the CAS and making sure that the CAS and/or CAS array are working, your DB store, DAG, disk capacity, et cetera, Windows services, et cetera. Then we're going to get into the concept of reporting and to understand what your service level is at a glance, and then look at some time at the end for Q&A. So with that, I'll jump into GSX Monitor first, because GSX Monitor is the start of it all, and we're the data collective that we use for that proactive side. So what we have here is what I would characterize as an admin dashboard, and we actually have a couple columns of servers here, and then these separators are there only for you to organize this. So in this case, we've got some Exchange 2010 servers and a DAG set up and a CAS array set up. We've got some Exchange 2007, some SharePoint servers, BlackBerry, including a BlackBerry HA cluster, and then over on this side, we actually have a mixed environment where these folks have some IBM platforms as well. We're here to talk about the Microsoft world, so we'll stay over here on the right-hand side. So each one of these bars represents one of the monitored servers fulfilling a certain function, and of course we've got the various servers that occupy the DAG grouped together and the CAS array grouped together so that it makes visual sense. There's actually some changes in the way this is going to look coming up in the not too distant future in our version 10.2, which will be out actually just in a matter of weeks. Okay, so kind of go over what this is showing us. Green is good, red is bad. I think most of us know that intuitively. And if you mouse over any one of these servers, you can kind of see why it is the color it is and see what's happening. So this is a visual reference that gives the administrator and the manager of a particular area of the service sort of the bird's eye view. In the background, there's alerting going out that tells us if something is in an alert condition. And there's also a web view of this where you can utilize profiles, so you present to the person with a certain area of responsibility only the servers that matter to them. So in this example, we've got Exchange. Let's say we only have Exchange in North America, and all of the administration group in that team, as well as the managers of the messaging environment, see all of that. But maybe an entirely different team is responsible for SharePoint, so maybe they don't see that when they're looking at their web interface. They only see the Exchange stuff and not the SharePoint stuff. SharePoint team sees the SharePoint information. If we had servers in multiple environs, so if we had some servers in North America and some in APAC and some in EMEA, we'd present to those people the appropriate stuff. Same thing as if we had people that are responsible for BlackBerry. In our little example here, we're seeing our whole world, and it depends how you want to structure that. Obviously, as well as presenting the data and this user interface to different people, the alerts can be targeted at certain individuals as well. And we'll get into that in a moment. So let's go look at a particular Exchange server. It's green, everything's up. The specific Windows services we want to monitor are indeed up. The way this works is the lights are telling us various things about the current condition. So in this case, we're looking at a DAG, and the DAG light is split. So the left-hand side tells us if the DAG is up. The right-hand side tells us if all the DB stores on that particular server that occupy it, in this case there's 2 DB stores, you can see the numeral 2 there, are all healthy or mounted. So only 2 partners in this DAG, so by definition, if one of of the DB stores is down, DAG services would be down for that DB store. But if you had multiple partners, you could conceivably have one server not be in a healthy condition, but the DAG is still up and functioning. The light is telling us if mail is piling up above acceptable levels of what we call pending mail, which is actually a sum of several different categories of mail that is waiting to be routed successfully. And a certain amount of that is normal, so you can set a threshold specific to that server and its normal function. So if it's a very busy environment, you might have a fairly large threshold. In other words, if we're below that threshold, it's normal. So the threshold should define the upper range of the normal range. As long as below that, things are okay. Then moving to some of the servers in our CAS, in this case it's a CAS array. So the CAS services on the left showing us that the CAS array is functioning is green, and then if one particular server in the array is not functioning, you might get a split light that shows us something other than a green condition on the right-hand side. Of course, we're seeing green and green. Since we're here, let's briefly talk about SharePoint, and we mentioned that we monitor it, but let's just go into that a little bit. We're monitoring the SharePoint server and the web services required on each of these servers for SharePoint to be functioning. We're monitoring the SharePoint logs, and we're looking for specific keyword strings, errors, if you will, in those SharePoint logs that indicate some diminishment of the service that the end users are getting. And then we have a light for the SQL database to make sure that A, we can access the SQL database and then gather some of our usage statistics there. Additionally, it's pretty common that people might have a mobility solution. So let's talk a little bit about BlackBerry. We're also monitoring the BlackBerry server. In this case, we have an HA cluster, so let's talk about the more complicated topology, where dark green shows us the primary is up, and the light green shows us that the standby server is available for failover to occur. The user light is telling us if we're having any user-level errors. In this case, we don't. We only have 6 users in this environment. And what we're actually doing there is looking at, is traffic flowing to our users, and we can even establish populations of critical users for our VIPs, our CEO, et cetera. CFO might be in that list, and we can make sure that their BlackBerry devices themselves seem to be working. The concept of log scanning that we just talked about with SharePoint continues here in BES servers, where we're looking for certain errors that are landing in the BES logs that we might observe there. And then is the SRP connection up and working? So again, we're here mostly to talk about Exchange. So let's dive into one of our Exchange servers. And what I've done is I've moved to the Server Settings tab, and I'm on Exchange scanning right now. So there's a lot of detail here. In point of fact, when you add a server, and I even can do that right from here, I can open the server's configuration, and I go through a wizard where I establish connectivity. I can, if this is CAS server, if it's in the mailbox role, I can make the particular settings, and I can scroll through each of these in turn to modify my settings or to establish them in the first place. I'm just jumping right into some servers that are already here, and that same configuration wizard's here if I create a new server entry, and it'll allow me to go through this page by page with the next finish concept. But each one of my servers here, I can establish its name. Is it part of a cluster? In this case, if there's multiple servers in a DAG, we relate them together and group them together as the various members of a DAG and where the various database stores are residing. Obviously some access credentials to get there. What those services do we want to monitor on each specific server, and the lists can be completely independent of each other. I don't actually have any turned on here. I'm not actually scanning because I don't want to take up bandwidth while we're doing our WebEx. What Exchange are we running, and then what roles does each one of these server entries occupy? So in this case, we've got a mailbox server, but even though Microsoft doesn't recommend it, many people do have the same server occupying multiple roles. So you're able to configure that if you want. If it's a CAS server, which CAS connectivity checks do we want to perform? In this case, we're only doing Outlook Web App, but we could also do POP3, IMAP, and or ActiveSync, all of them or none of them or just one of them, as you see here, and we can establish that. Also establish some CAS alerts And the CAD alerts are looking at several different things. And again, this is all setup screens. You're only going to do this in the beginning, and if you choose to tune something differently over time. So in this case, we're establishing a specific alert if the cast roll is not functioning, so in other words, down, and then we have a reciprocal up alert. We might as well talk a little bit about alerting here for a second. I have alert if down default. That doesn't mean I'm going to do the default alert. It means I'm going to use the default profile. The default profile is the profile that we've chosen to name default. I could have multiple profiles here, and there is no numerical limitation on that, so you could deal with different alerts in different ways. And then here's all my choices, and here's what I'm actually doing. So in this case, the only thing I'm doing when the cast is down is sending an email to GSX Monitor at gsx.net. It's not very smart because if cast is down, it may not be flowing, and so I'm going to let you know as soon as you fix it, right? So I probably would want to send, some SMS text, and maybe I want to launch another program and send a command line to it, or I want to play a sound on the monitoring workstation, because there's always somebody there. That may not be true, actually, so you might not want to do that. If I want to send a Windows pop-up message, if I want to send a trap to SCOM as well, I can integrate to SCOM with our SNMP integration module and publish the MIB, so that's part of our SCOM management pack. So now what I've modified the default profile to be, since we're here talking about profiles and alerting, let's just chat about this for another moment. There's a scheduler where I can schedule different alerts and different people to be notified in different ways at different times of day. So if you have an on-call schedule, we can utilize that. If we want the sun, where we have different teams around the globe and we want different people to be notified in different ways, we can utilize it for that. I can establish a severity code for this type of down condition that I can use for later reporting. As you see, we've made this a severity 99. I send reminders, so reminders are things you might want to use a little gingerly because you might drive yourself crazy, but for very high priority things, you probably want to turn that on. So it's going to send the alert, and if it's still down, it's going to send the alert again and again and again until you remediate the situation. Escalation is a kind of a workflow concept where if I've normally alerted, so-and-so, in this case, I can say I want to escalate that after, 20 minutes of downtime, I want to do something entirely different. I want to now notify the senior person on the team. The original one went to the junior person. She can't fix it. And so after 27 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever you've set this to, we're now going to notify a member of the senior team and send to Jane, and Jane's going to jump in and take care of the problem more quickly because she has a higher skill set and experience. Or maybe I'm notifying the manager of this service, so because he or she's going to start getting screamed at by the users, and it might be good to be notified at that point. And then there's also an enabled reminder in the escalation, so I can be telling that other source, again, repetitively, just like this concept of reminders here. I'm not going to bother actually making that change. It's the concept of alerting, and again, normally there is a down alert and a reciprocal and corresponding up alert, so you can notify the same people that it is no longer a problem. So the alerts that we have here would be if Outlook web app access time in the cycle since the last scan exceeds a certain threshold. You define that sensitivity of that threshold, and you define who gets notified, if anyone. You don't have to do any of these, but this is to allow you to be very responsive. Threshold alert on the number of tasks queued. Okay, very common in an Exchange environment where this number can get out of control, but Microsoft says that this number should not be greater than 1. So in this case, we've set it to be that, but obviously you're going to look at what's happening in your environment and decide to tune this to be as sensitive as you want to be. Connectivity latency alerts allows us, remember up here we had various cast checks for the different connectivity protocols. So in this case, we can have a latency check for Outlook Web App, IMAP, POP3, and ActiveSync. They don't have to be the same. You can set them to be what you want. In this case, we don't have any of the alerts turned on, so obviously we would normally want to do that. And then individual Outlook web services, so the availability service, the offline address book, RCP, HTTP status, and the auto-discover status. So we can be checking to make sure all of those are indeed working As again, obviously, we've also set up all of the Windows services here specifically. Just a couple of these settings, because once you understand how this works, most of the other settings work very similarly. We've got about another 10 minutes before any of the questions come in, so let me just remind you, if you do have questions, put them in the chat window in the lower right-hand corner, and then also if you want to schedule a one-on-one to get all the meat of this, because there's a lot of detail. Again, please reach me, or you can schedule that right now with Carl and send him something in the chat window, or at some later time, reach out at gsx.com to schedule something. Okay, so here we have the scanning frequency, and in this case, this server is set to be scanned every 5 minutes, or whatever I set this number to be. Okay, so I guess I don't have numlock on here. Okay, oh, that's sort of a cluster that we've set up that all the different DAG servers are in one cluster. That's why I can't change that, because I have to change all of them, and I would do that in the cluster settings. So here's what I'm talking about. When I have an individual server, now I've set that to 9 minutes. So what's happening with that server is every 9 minutes we connect GSX Monitor from its installation, connects, makes sure it's working. If it works, it comes back and does it again in 9 minutes or 29 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever we've set this value to be. Okay, and there's only two things can happen. It works or it does not. If it works, we keep coming back every cycle. If it does not work, we can either go into retry mode or alert mode, and that's governed by these other columns here. So in this, I have a number of 1, which stands for the number of minutes between retry cycles. So if I can't connect on the normal 5-minute or 10-minute or 7-minute cycle, we're going to now start checking more often. And this next column tells me the alert threshold during business hours is 1 minute. So that means I'm going to wait 1 minute if I recognize a problem on the normal scan cycle. The rating is so that I can get a retry in. So I'm going to actually have 2 failures in this particular example before we send an alert. If I don't want to do that, I can set this value to 0, which means I'm going to send the alert immediately. I'm going to still continue to test every minute to see if things get better, and then I'm going to send out the up alert to let you know that things are working. So these different columns work together to kind of tune your sensitivity up and down. And I should make a quick comment here. Alerting, everybody in a situation, I think, that's been doing this for a while, where you have monitoring, it's going to be great, and then we suddenly get flooded with so many alerts that they lose all their meaning to us. That is a tremendous amount of tuning available in GSX Monitor to avoid that if this story works for you, the boy crying wolf scenario, where there was a wolf this time, but we didn't notice it because we got the wolf, wolf, wolf all along, right? So we want to suppress the nuisance alerts or the things that don't really matter because we're being too sensitive and the reason the way we do that is we're not suppressing the alerts, we're actually changing our sensitivity to make it model what you want us ourselves to respond to. But I skipped something here. There's an Exchange remote agent. We're talking about being agentless, and I should tell you that there is actually the availability of a very small footprint agent that you can put on the server that allows you to limit the number of ports open for WIMI and PowerShell. And that's optional, that's up to you, so it's not required to do monitoring, but if indeed you want to, for security reasons, limit the range of ports available, it might be advisable to use that small agent. So we talked about alert during business hours. We can establish the business hours and the time zone where that server resides, and then we can have entirely different sensitivity thresholds during off hours, if you even have off hours. And then, of course, what are the alerts if Exchange is down, up, and we've seen some of this already. Up here in the preferences column, probably actually go there and look at the various alerts that we have for different conditions. So for BES, for Exchange, you see all of these different conditions: Exchange up, down, network up, down, Exchange pending, dead mail thresholds violated, come back to normal, disk space. All of these different conditions here are recognizable conditions in Exchange, and then I think down at the bottom here we have similar stuff for SharePoint. Okay. Very quickly, let's go on to Exchange Mail. And again, we talked about we can establish several servers that are part of a DAG, and we use that with the cluster settings to relate multiple servers together here. And then in this example, we're looking at various alert profiles so that if the mailbox role is down, if the database white space in the DB store exceeds some finite value or percentage, and then if the threshold is size of an individual store goes beyond some number. Again, these thresholds you define, so you're only going to be alerted when you have those conditions. So if your white space is getting out of control, wouldn't it be nice if you got notified? And again, you can define specific alert methodology that you're going to be notified by. And there's these replication health alerts for the servers that are in a DAG, so that if replication between the members of the DAG is down, or there is a warning condition where replication may not be working properly, you can define what alerts are. And of course, that's all happening as part of our scanning, where we're looking at TPS listener, quorum group, all those different components that make up effective DAG replication is happening on an ongoing basis. Let's jump in a little bit to some of the statistics we have for Exchange. And here are all of our Exchange servers, and then they're also listed here in our various categories based on roles. So in this example, we only have one DAG. There are two servers that have DB stores on them, and then we can see our individual DB stores here, and are they in, what condition are they in? So in this case, we've got two copies, where copy, our other healthy copies, when our last backup, when was it last inspected, what's the average mailbox size, number of mailboxes, et cetera, so you get some very effective statistics. Anyway, here's the replication health checks that I just talked about a moment ago, and you can see Active Manager, Cluster Network, RPC Listener, TCP Listener, all these things are showing as green and passed, and that's indeed why our DAG is healthy. If I want to go specifically into any individual server that's in this, and I can see what has the mailbox role, I can see how many DB stores that are mounted and healthy. In this case, we only have one. Let's see if I have any multiples on it. Okay, so there's another one where I've got mounted and healthy copies, and then for each individual server, I can see individual health checks that have occurred, the number of connections, et cetera, to those database stores that are existing. We talk a lot about user scenarios, and I think I better jump onto that because we only got a few minutes before we go into Q&A, and look at what we can do there as well. So I'm going to go to the Scenario tab. Okay, there's various scenarios we can do. Mail routing scenarios where we're going. We also have a SharePoint scenario that we can talk about. Maybe join us for another session. So the scenarios are repeated U-level transactions. Some people call these synthetic transactions. And the real transactions with synthetic users. GSX Monitor is acting like a user and doing these repetitive transactions to make sure that the infrastructure really can execute them. And there's some metrics on these. So now I've got demo data. I don't actually have any of these turned on. But we have a probe here that's called Internet External Mail. There's actually three kinds of probes. It turns out I don't have one in my demo data of one of them. So let's talk about the simplest one. It's every X number of minutes I can send a message from one server in our topology to another server in our topology. This one happens to be an external probe. But let's pretend I'm sending it from server 1 to server 17. So GSX Monitor is going to send a message from one point in our world to another point in our world and go to that target server and see if the message arrived there. It actually embeds a specific multi-character key in the message, which, again, we're not really running it, but that down here would show every one of those transactions, and then the key that's embedded in the message. So we're not just looking that a message arrives on server 17, looking at a very specific message, each one that we've sent every 5 minutes. So we're doing not just to see that the service is up and that we can effectively get internal mail traffic to different points in our world, but also get statistics and metrics on what our average routing time, daily, weekly, monthly is, max, min, and the number of messages that fall within our SLA, which is defined here, and then the number of messages that work with double our SLA, again, and that's defined right here. So that's the first type of probe. This type of probe, okay, I'm not reading quickly here. This one's called internal. This one's called external. So this was the first example actually right here. The Internet External Mail example, is 5 minutes. I'm sending a message to Echo site out on the internet somewhere, or perhaps more than one Echo site. And Echo site does nothing but do a return to sender. So that message goes all out and all back because that Echo site turned it around. Again, it still has that embedded key. So when we look at basically it's come back to the same sender on that same server, and we see that individual messages went out and back. So then these cycle times would be round trips. Okay, so this first one was the point-to-point that we said, and those metrics would be the point-to-point. The second one would be the round trip. The third type of probe is what's called BlackBerry probe, and the BlackBerry probe is sending a message out from your Exchange server through BES, through the RP connection, through Carrier X, whoever that is, all the way out to a handheld device. The handheld device sees a specific confirm command in subject line and turns it around and sends it all the way back through SRP, RIM, carrier, yada, yada, yada. And so if these are successfully occurring, we're going to know that the entire architecture is up and functioning, even those components that are outside of our world, like RIM and the carrier. A lot more to talk about with BlackBerry. There's the whole concept of user-level monitoring we talked about, but let's just stay with the high-level concepts of doing like a user. I'm confusing. When I user-level monitoring for BlackBerry, I meant individual users, your priority users, your individual users, to make sure that traffic can flow to their individual devices, so that's to know that individual people are succeeding and working, your high-value mobility customers and users. And then when I'm talking about user scenarios, I'm talking more globally, that can user-level transactions work within your enterprise. In the typical Microsoft shop, they probably also have SharePoint, so I just want to remind you that we have SharePoint scenarios that do repetitive transactions like upload a document, do a blog post. There's 7 or 8 of them that we can do repetitively to make sure that those services actually function. Also, when we're talking, remember, this concept of alerting is going in many ways to our first level of the objectives of monitoring. Something's down, we recognize it, or the thresholds, as we looked at the cast latency thresholds and things like that. It not be down, but we're experiencing some slowdowns. The second level is looking at data. So I'm going to just go very quick to graphs, and we want to go to Exchange and look at some performance metrics. So if I wanted to look at some Exchange performance metrics like CPU utilization or access time, in this case I don't actually monitor all day, so I don't really have that much data, but I've got 4 or 5 days. If you were running this consistently, you wouldn't have these bands of red where the serve down as you had a crash. So this green line is the actual experience that the GSX Monitor installation is experiencing, much like a user. Depending on scan cycle, you have, let's say, up to a month of data here, 3-4 weeks perhaps, and then you'd see these vertical blue lines and then normal activity mounting across the page. So we have these radical spikes that are far out of normal, and let's pretend we saw that every single day at the same time interval. That would lead us to the question of, like, what in the world is happening there? This is how this kind of data can help you make your environment work more consistently. Because, first of all, we didn't even know that spike and therefore slowdown in access time existed. But now, let's say we saw it every single day, which, again, the data is, I'm just making this up as we go along. That radical change in what we're going to define as normal behavior, which is down here. Now to go look at that, and if we look at that time signature every day, let's say at 2 p.m., maybe there's a agent that's triggered, and does it have to happen in the middle of the workday? Now we know to ask that question and go chase that question down to see if we can remediate. Or your users are complaining that something was slow, and that's just an anecdote that's really hard to do anything with. But let's say you saw a plateau all day yesterday. Okay, something really did happen. Now with that, now you can correlate all the other statistics. So we're looking at Exchange, information store, mail transfer agent, SMTP mail. So you could be looking at levels of volumes of transactions at different time signatures and get a very interesting picture of what's happening in your environment. With that, let's jump into the reporting module. We've gone 5 minutes into Q&A. For those of you that have asked questions. I apologize. I'm just going to go very quickly here so that we can get onto that. Carl, maybe if you want to queue up some questions when I get done talking a little bit about Analyzer. Okay, so apologies for the fast delivery here. GSX Monitor is doing all its probing or its alerting, giving us that granular data that we just looked at, and then every day GSX Monitor collects and collates all the statistics and pushes it into another part of the tool called GSX Analyzer. GSX Analyzer is intended to do several things. One is to provide a executive management dashboard. So in this case, I'm looking at all Exchange servers in my whole environment, and I can see really statistics of great detail on one of those servers. I've chosen to define certain statistics as KPIs and see them at a glance in gauge format. I have an availability pie chart for the day. I have the 15 most recent days, and I can navigate to BlackBerry. Perhaps I have different KPIs for BlackBerry. Now all the data here and all the statistics here are for BlackBerry, right? And if I said, oh, I don't want the day, I want the week or the month, I can navigate to that, and I won't bother doing that just so we can move on. And this is giving me a very detailed picture of how my environment's behaved in the time scale I have asked for. It's profile driven, and I'm a super admin, so I can see all different types of servers. But if I was just Steve, the admin for BlackBerry in Europe, maybe only these two servers are in Europe. That's all I would see if indeed that's what my breadth of data is limited to. The person that owns it globally sees everything. In this case, I'm seeing Exchange, BlackBerry, et cetera, all the different platforms, SharePoint, et cetera, that we have. So you could put the proper data to the right person so they can make effective decisions very, very quickly. The alerts here, and that's coming actually in real time, but I also have an alerts tab. I'm just going to talk about these quickly. I'm not going to go into them. Alerts tab would allow me to mine the data of all the alerts I have ever gotten or have ever been issued by GSX Monitor. So let's say I just got an alert of some type and I fixed it, and geez, didn't it happen a couple months ago or a couple weeks ago? And I could go into the alerts viewer and mine the data to see if that type of alert has happened on resource 712B previously. And then I could see, oh, look, it's happened every 3 weeks for the last year. And now it's a pattern. It's not just an alert. And we might want to look at that in a different way because now we know the pattern exists. The statistics tab allows me to look basically at the data we have here over whatever date range I want to mine out. So let's say I had that failure 3 weeks ago, and in the overview, I'm only looking at the most recent day, week, or month. But say I wanted to look at the 5 days leading up to that crash 6 weeks ago, I could do that on the Statistics tab. The Reports tab allow me to look at, well, let's say I wanted to look at my SharePoint log reports of the errors that are occurring because I didn't want to get an alert for everything, and I wanted certain things to just dump on a daily report. I'd be able to go grab that there. Trends gets a little more interesting, where I can look at trends over time. In this case, I'm looking at all the highlighted statistics for Exchange servers, so server uptime, network uptime, et cetera, and looking at all, and they happen to be very correlated. And then what the ... is out here is a forecast. This example, I'm looking at just a few days, but if I wanted to create a new trend, I could either create a brand new one or utilize one of our existing templates. Let's just create a complete new one. So here are all my statistics that are available to me on my Exchange servers. I can pick some or all of them, and then I can do them across some or all of my servers. I can do this as an ad hoc report, and then I can individually graph the ones I want on the fly, or I could create a report to go to a distribution list, and I could decide that I want these 4 statistics graphed, but everything else I just want in numerical format, okay? I can that I want that to go off in French or whatever. I want this to be monthly for 12 months. I will send it to certain people. So I'm going to create a list of the people I want this to go to as a PDF, and I want to have it to look a certain way so I can format and put in a logo, et cetera. And then do I want a forecast or not? In this case, I want a forecast for 6 months. So I'm going to use 12 months of source data and go out 6 months. I'm not going to bother doing that. It kind of gives you a similar idea to here, but with what statistics I've asked for. So I have certain source data and then statistics out in the future. Just imagine going into a management meeting where you can look at 18 months of SMTP mail transactional growth, and then you could project what it's going to be rising up and off into infinity out in the future. And everyone in that meeting would see very quickly, oh my goodness, now I see what you meant, Steve, that the growth is going to kill us, and in 3 months we're going to be in real trouble, so we have to deal with this now. That kind of thing, we talk about being proactive to understand where are we going and what do we have to change. The last tab very quickly, and we're going to go into the questions, is this concept called environmental health, which utilizes idle concepts to compare all my servers or some subsets of servers over time. So in this example, I have several different servers, 6 servers, that the underlying bars are tanned. So this is the metric that we've said is our SLA. You can find any metric you want to be your SLA. And then we have certain metrics that we have KPIs for. So if I scroll down here, I can see that I've established 3 specific KPIs that are making the SLA what it is. We believe that these are the key indicators that we have to manage to make my SLA good. And obviously it's not good because we have 4 servers that are yellow. And we've decided, by the way, you can set the threshold where you go from green to yellow to red. The red line is my contract value, and my average value is subcontract. So whether I have a formal contract with external customers, if you're providing managed services, or you have internal departmental customers, they're probably very happy because the average is going below the acceptable threshold. And then you drill into individual servers, and I don't remember how I set this up, but it's going to go and grab the server-specific statistics for that server for that time period. And I'm not turning on alerting, so maybe I haven't jammed any statistics in there. It's trying to find it. But let's jump back into PowerPoint for 1 second and go kind of to a wrap-up slide. We talked about our agenda. To wrap up, we're monitoring performance, capacity, user experience, availability, and service delivered from the user experience, multi-platform, and let's move on to Q&A. Carl, some questions queued up for us?
Yeah, we've got a couple of questions.
My apologies that I went almost and burned the whole time, folks. Told you there'd be a lot to talk about.
Our first question is regarding requirements for the monitor station. What's required from a hardware standpoint or OS standpoint?
First of all, you actually can't. I'm running this. It's actually not running right now, but when I'm turned on monitoring, it actually is working from my laptop. You could conceivably monitor from a workstation class machine that you know in your environment, in your department, where you grab it and turn it on and start monitoring. In realistically, though, you're going to want to make sure that that's running all the time, and you might set it up to run as a service on that workstation class machine. Somebody's not really responsible for it if you walk out the door. So if you put it in a server room, you'll probably run it on a VM slice. It's a Windows application, so it's got to be running on a Windows server platform. As far as the capacity of that box, I mean, it can run on a workstation. It's going to run on pretty much any VM slice you put out there. We have a specific list, so if you need that, we'll send you the specific specs for it. But it's got a pretty small footprint. I'm going to go fast to answer questions, so I know that's not a particularly complete answer, but we can send you the specific detail in writing for whoever needed that. Carl, cue up another one.
Okay.
We got 1 minute left, so my apologies, folks.
The next question is, what is the overhead on the servers being monitored?
Well, it's much like another user in the environment. So if you have 10,000 users in your environment, it's much like having 10,001. It's a very, very small footprint. We actually have some specific metrics on that, and I can send you that. But just for the purposes of our answer at the moment, it's negligible, likened on having an additional user in your environment, and we can send you those specific metrics too. But one more in, Carl, and then our time is up. Sorry for that.
Okay, the next question is regarding the database availability group alerting. Can you explain the DAG alerting scenarios? What are the conditions for the alert?
Okay, I mean, it might be easier to show you that. I think we kind of went through it when we were on the statistics tab. What's actually happening in the DAG is that all these different replication health checks are occurring cyclically, based on your scan cycles. So TCP listener, RPC listener, replay servers, quorum group, all the ones you see here that are occurring have to pass for you to be in a green condition. So if you remember back on the DAG mailbox checks, we had a DAG down and a DAG warning. So depending on if we can either these or some of these are in a warning state where things are not working properly, then we're going to change that light and issue those appropriate alerts based on what we're seeing when we scan these individual servers. And the lack of being able to gather this status constitutes a warning condition. So if we cannot gather the status of each one of these replication health checks, we are going to go into at least a warning. One more quick, Carl, where everyone doesn't mind if we go over.
A similar question. This is regarding CAS array. How does the CAS array monitoring work?
So for CAS array, again, what we're doing is we're making sure that all of those latency checks are working and that we can connect and indeed do that. And the concept of an array is doing that for each one of the members of the CAS, because conceptually the DAG and the CAS are providing high availability services so that multiple servers are fulfilling the same function, so that if one cannot do it, others should be. And of course with the CAS array there's also the concept of load balancing, which may be too big of a topic to get into right now when we're already over time. The person who asked that question, maybe if we could reach out, or actually Carl has your name, so we'll reach out to you to give you a more complete answer on that one. With folks, thank you so much. Apologize that we didn't get to all the questions that were answered, or rather asked. I think I said at the outset we would never be able to cover everything, and I think we blasted through many things at a very high speed. So if you saw something that seems interesting and want more detail, reach out to either myself directly or to gsx@gsx.com or sales@gsx.com, or if you have an account manager that you know, reach out to them and we can set up a one-on-one. We take our time and go through everything in a little bit more detail and to answer your specific questions then. So thanks, everyone, and we're going to sign off. Appreciate your time.
All right, everyone, thank you for your attendance. There's going to be a brief survey at the end of this. If you just take a couple minutes and fill that out for us, it would be great. And as Steve said, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact us. We can go a little bit more in depth, and walk through some of the things that we kind of just touched on lightly today. But with that, thanks again for your attendance, and we'll talk to you soon.